What is up, everybody? This is Chase, and welcome back to the Wellness Center podcast. I am so excited that you guys are here today. I want you to know that this episode is going to be phenomenal. The guest that I have today is not only someone who's highly trained in his field, but he has lived the life that requires skills and tools of resilience. And I am so excited that he's going to be here today to not only share his story and vulnerably do so, but to teach you guys some actual skills that you can use in your daily life to help you get to the next level. So it's super awesome, guys. Again, make sure you listen to the whole thing. And as you're listening to this, I want to give everyone a call to action as well. As you're listening to this episode, I want you to be thinking of at least two people that you know not only could hear this message and receive it well, but could use the skills and tools that are going to be taught today by my guest. And I want you to share it with them. We had 25 views on my first episode, which was huge with Tyler. The goal is 100 this time. I know we can get it if we all work together. So become part of the tribe. Again, make sure to share this episode. So today, now that I've hyped up my guest so much, I'm going to introduce him. So my guest, he has some awesome stuff in his biography. He's been a therapist for 11 years. And again, I have it all written down. So he is trained and certified in emotionally focused therapy, internal family systems, parent-child interaction therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, parent project, real colors, trauma resiliency model, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and accelerated resolution therapy. He is also an avid gun shooter. He's placed second place in a sniper adventure challenge, which required a 30-hour backpacking trip. He is married and he has two beautiful daughters. And this, who I'm talking about, is none other than McCall Stephens. McCall, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks, Chase.
That's so good to hear, man.
I love it.
Dude, have you been having a good weekend so far?
So far, so good. Had
Good.
some home projects working this morning. Good lunch with a buddy of ours, Chase Jones, and
Hey.
now I'm on with you, and it's fantastic.
Dude, your weekend couldn't get any better. For those, I'm recording the Saturday prior to when this episode's going to come out. And another little backstory, McCall and me, we've been good friends for quite some time. So, but that's awesome. You had lunch with Chase, and I know you've been working on some house projects. So that's really cool, man. And again, thank you for coming on. This is for everyone.
Absolutely.
This is McCall's first time on a podcast. So
Yeah,
he's absolutely
fantastic.
It's going to be so much fun. So McCall, you ready to get to the meat and potatoes of this podcast? Some of these questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, McCall, first question for you. I want you to take me back to a young McCall Stephens. When is the first time you started noticing that you had challenges with your mental health?
Mhm. It is a good question. And I almost want to challenge that a little bit in that, like, I started having, say, thoughts of suicide or just not wanting to be around, like really young, maybe 10-ish. And as I have worked with people and as I have worked on myself, I don't actually think that, I don't know if I would call it mental health or not. I just think that it's really normal because when we come up to a challenge, the easiest thing to do is to avoid it. And I think our mind naturally goes to a lot of times not being here.
Right.
And so sometimes we may or may not have a plan, but that's the easy way to go is I just wish I wasn't here.
Well, and to add to that too, I know that so I grew up in a Christian culture. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and McCall, I know you are as well. And they teach you so often growing up that the heavenly glory is we can't even describe how amazing it is. So I think that while they're not trying to perpetuate the idea of killing yourself sounds so great, but I know that for me personally, that was one thing that didn't help very much is knowing that there's actually something better after this life is over.
Right.
Yeah.
And how easy would it be to alleviate that suffering?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I wouldn't have admitted this like maybe 15 years ago or so, but my parents are divorced, and there was a lot of people that had asked like, oh, that must have been hard. And at the time, like up until 10 or 15 years ago,
And how
I
old
would
were
have
you when
just,
they got divorced?
I was one.
Okay.
And so like I would just say I was so young, I didn't know any better. And
Hmm.
it was great because I had 2 birthdays, 2 Christmases, you know,
It worked
and
out for you.
that was me totally just like covering up some of that hurt and some of that pain.
Hmm.
But my mom, growing up in the, you know, early feminist movement, she was that super strong woman
Hmm.
that, not intentionally, but the message that I perceived from that was I can't cry. I can't be weak because my mom's not.
Right.
And so I have to be strong and not, I never really saw her feel.
Right.
So I can't feel. And, you know, it's not her fault. It just is.
It is, right.
And so,
It's what you learned at a young age of how to act and behave,
yeah.
right?
And
That comparison.
it was, it was hard. And so when
Yeah.
something difficult came up, I just, instead of learning how to deal with it, then I would just suffer through it.
Yeah.
And so that suffering, you know, instead of learning to express anger or just be okay with normal human feelings, I would just shove it all down.
Right.
And that would result in anger or fights or whatever.
How old were you when all of this kind of stuff was going on? Like when it
Oh,
started?
yeah, probably 10 through 18,
10 to
10 through
okay.
20.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something I want to dive right into really quick, if I may just interrupt in your story. I think it's so unique that you talk about your mom going through like the big feminist rise era, and she was the tough one who taught you how not to cry and to be tough and to swallow your emotions, because that's what you saw your mom doing. And
Hmm.
typically, especially in a lot of recovery work, we look at father wounds quite aggressively.
Hmm.
And I don't personally see a lot of time where we work through our mother wounds or our mother trauma.
Hmm.
And I wonder, has that, like, as you go through and you've done all this recovery work and you've gained all these skills, have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why don't we do more trauma work based on mom?
Do you know what? That's a good question. I definitely have my father wounds as well,
Right.
because even though I had kind of that court mandated time with him, if you will, it it has definitely become far and few in between for a long time.
Right.
And so um, I think that how I look at it, anyways, is how we have our view of our higher power
Hmm.
seems to naturally come from our fathers.
Right.
And so as we learn how to work through our father wounds, if you will,
Right.
I think that, like the stuff with my mom, that seemed to kind of work itself out, if you will,
Okay.
as I worked through the father stuff.
It
I don't
just kind of
know.
came naturally with things.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
so the skills that I learned with the intentionality of working through the father wounds kind of started to just apply. Like, I don't blame my mom.
right.
Like, I don't think she had any intention in the world of doing something that was going to hurt me.
Right. Yeah, she's your mom.
Right. Right.
Right.
And so I think that that compassion that I learned to first have on myself and then my dad naturally flowed over
No,
to my mom.
I really appreciate that you shared that. That was something I know not only I needed to hear personally, but other people are going to need to hear that as well. Because I know I personally hold a lot of resentment towards my mom because of
Hmm.
some of the ways in which she showed up. Not that she did anything wrong; it was just what she did. She did her best, and naturally
Hmm.
that wounded me as her son. And just to hear that the level of compassion she had for you and everything was able to translate over for you. So thank you for that, McCall. I really appreciate it. That was a nugget of
Yeah.
gold right there. So sorry, let's continue on.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I keep going. You were talking about fighting and stuff and not crying. You're about 10 to 18.
Yeah. And the sucky thing about some of the mental health things that we go through is a lot of these things that we learn when we're so young,
Mhm.
they actually work, right? Like, I felt bad. I had all these, maybe thoughts of suicide, if you will,
Hmm.
or just even not wanting to be here sometimes.
Right.
And they worked. It I got through life.
Right. You've survived up till this point successfully.
Right. And so when you learn these things in those moments, they work fantastic.
Right. Whether they're
The,
effective or ineffective in the long run. Right.
right. And that's the thing though, is I think that the part of me that could recognize that shutting down worked,
Hmm.
all it could see was this moment in time of, do I follow through with some sort of plan to kill myself,
Hmm.
or do I shove it down and not feel to make it through?
Right.
And if those are the only two options, shoving it down is great.
Right. It's
Shoving
effective.
it
Yeah.
down, it works, it's effective. And because I knew also deep down that I didn't want to die, I didn't want to not be here. I
Right.
also just didn't know what to do, say, at that age. And so here's this problem where it works. And so then the next time that something comes up, instead of learning again how to deal with it, shove that down too.
Right. And so did you feel like growing up, those were kind of your only two options to survive, were either shove it down or kill yourself?
Um, Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the dumbest thing, because I know, especially now,
Hmm.
had I gone to my mom, she would have been like, oh, let's talk about that. Let's
Yeah.
do all these things.
Hmm.
I had taken on this mantle and this idea and this belief of, I can't talk about this, or I need to be strong, just from
And,
my own understanding of the world.
and that was because your mom was just as strong.
Right.
So you felt like strength when you were young, and I'm paraphrasing, you felt like strength when you were young was being able to handle anything without help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Dude, man,
Yeah. So,
thank you for your vulnerability, McCall. Like I know I
yeah, of
personally
course.
already love you, but this is cool. This it's not cool that that kind of stuff happens, but as I was listening to my first episode, there was times where Tyler would say these like really just terrible things like that were so sad and so heartbreaking. I'd be like, cool, dude, thanks for sharing. And I'm like, I gotta work on
Wait a minute.
yeah, it
That's not
wasn't
cool.
cool.
But
No.
at the same time, as you work through it,
Hmm.
it actually is cool. It is something that, and I think that this is a crucial part of the process, is learning that these negative things that have hurt us so much
Hmm.
are also the things that help us become who we need to be.
And I love that. And that actually segues into my next question for you, which is the hero's journey question. And for those of you who are listening who are unaware of what the hero's journey is, the hero's journey is typically a pivotal moment in someone's life where they go through an extreme challenge or trial and typically come through the other side better, more humble, some braver, something they've learned throughout the process. So with all of the challenges that you went through, McCall, and the things that you've grown from, can you please share with everyone a hero's journey of yours?
Yeah. I think there's two in particular
Okay.
that really kind of stand out to me. And the first was, I would have been about 13 years old.
Okay.
And when I was young, I had seizures.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, long story short, what had happened was I went up to Idaho with my biological father
Hmm.
and on vacation 2 weeks before school started.
Hmm.
And I I was not a great person with medication or remembering things. So I didn't take a single pill while I was there.
Hmm.
And then the
Your
week
seizure
before,
medication.
yeah, the seizure
Yeah.
medication. And then the week before, I went down to southern Utah for vacation with my mom, and she made sure that I took all my medication. And of course, because she didn't know,
Hmm.
made sure that I took it at full dose. And
Oh, okay.
so essentially, what had happened is my body had, not knowing what to do with this full dose of medication, it took the medication and it altered it into a poison. And so it put me into a coma for however long, I don't remember, I was in a coma for.
Oh, yeah.
And so here's this thing where I already felt stupid in school. Like
Hmm.
my sister, straight A student, didn't ever have to study, really smart. And I
Hmm.
struggled through high school.
Hmm.
And so here's this time where I already felt dumb. And then I was also going to have to probably stay back a grade because I was in a coma like the day that school started.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so, on a quick little side note for your listeners, because I think this is freaking awesome.
Hmm.
The morning of, I came down to read scriptures with my family, and I finished putting my shirt on, and I walked down, and my mom asked me, apparently, because I don't remember any of this, "Are you ready for school?" And I said, yeah, I'm ready. How come? She's like, "Well, you have a shirt on, but you don't have any pants or underwear on." So I had walked down in just a t-shirt, ready to go to school. And so she said, "No, you're not going to school." And she had
Was
my sister's,
was this
sorry, what?
was this before your coma or after?
This was the morning of me going into a coma,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay. So
And
early
so
early signs of brain damage.
of something is off, right? And
Yeah.
so to make it even better, this my mom says, "Okay, you're not going to school. I have these things that I need to go do. Asked my sister to look after me. She didn't go to school that day either.
Hmm.
And sometime in the afternoon, my um, my mom calls and asks my sister, "How's McCall doing?" And like, "Oh, he's fine." "Well, what's he doing now?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know. Like he said he was going to go out for a walk somewhere." And my mom's like, "Go find him."
Hmm.
And so apparently I had left the house, and at some point between, 8 a.m. when my mom left and made sure that I had pants on, I had taken them back off. So here I am walking around my neighborhood again in only a t-shirt.
And now in a coma, I'm assuming, laying down.
and and so at this I'm still mobile, and then it was that afternoon that my mom called my stepdad and said, "We need to go home, give him a call and take him to the ER because something is off." And so
Yeah.
then that night was when I actually went into the coma.
Gotcha.
So um but this whole process, like, I one of the kind of messages that I took for myself was like, I'm not smart because I couldn't remember to take my medication. I already knew that I was not smart just from school,
Hmm.
partially because of these seizures. It was hard for me to pay attention and retain information.
Hmm.
And then I was going to have to stay back a year as I came out of the coma and was realizing, like, I've now missed like a month of school. I'm
Gotcha.
already behind.
So it
I'm
was
going
a
to have to kind of go
significant,
back a grade.
it was a significant coma.
So between just that and the hospital and then the time at home, kind of making sure that things are okay.
Hmm.
So there was that one that, like, I thought was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever have to go through.
Yeah.
And long story short, there, it was definitely not. Because about 7 years ago, my wife, I found out I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago, somewhere around there, I found out my wife was having an affair.
Hmm.
And so that all of a sudden just kind of tore my world apart.
Right.
And I think a lot of it was because I knew that we weren't great.
Hmm.
You it was that roommate kind of feel, but I never thought that that would ever happen.
Right.
And so it just like shook me in way too many ways than I care to count.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things there was, here I am, you know, a therapist,
Hmm.
and how much of a crappy person or a failure am I
Hmm.
that I am trying to help other people and their marriages, and I can't even figure my own out.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even keep my own together. And so here's this like just wrecking ball to my life
Yeah.
in terms of who am I? What am I doing here?
What's the point
What's
of
the
it all?
point? Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the suicidal ideation.
There was some,
Mm-hmm.
but there was this part, if you will, like deep inside of me that like I knew this was not my fault.
Good.
Like there's certain things that I knew that I did not do great,
Right.
sure. But I knew that it wasn't me
Right.
that chose to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some times, sure, absolutely, where I wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that was because at that time I didn't recognize even my own feelings. Still, I had just shoved a lot of stuff down because it worked from when I was young.
Right. So in those really traumatic events, you reverted back to what has worked in the past for you, just naturally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's this big, huge problem
Right.
that I'm struggling with. And I think another big component of this is I didn't have a good support system built up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when this hit, there wasn't a lot of help, and I really struggled
You were
to
alone.
find help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite significant, McCall, and thank you for being willing to share both of those really
Yeah.
hard stories. I definitely want to dig into both of them and and ask you a couple of more hard and deep questions. And I know that what's going to come from these questions is really going to be valuable for everyone who listens, anyone who's experienced what you've experienced. Um, those thoughts and feelings that you're not smart and that you're crappy and that you're a failure. I
Hmm.
know they come from the different stories. Yeah, I'm not smart. When was the first time you realized that you weren't smart, that you started to believe that lie? First time you can remember.
I believe it was second grade.
Okay.
And
And what happened?
I don't know if this was because of the medication or what, but I remember that at least through this point,
Hmm.
I could listen to the teacher talk and I could write down and take notes or write about what they were saying.
Hmm.
And I felt like I understood it. And I could listen and write at the same time and take this new information in and process it and regurgitate it.
Hmm.
And there was a day in second grade that I went to go take these notes and it was gone.
The ability to,
The ability to do that
okay.
and to maybe I could say like hold multiple pieces of information in my mind at one time.
Hmm.
And so from that point on, like I struggled with
Gotcha.
school because I couldn't get all of the information that I needed from the teacher and process it and comprehend it in the time that they were going over it.
Hmm.
So no matter what I did, I was constantly just falling behind.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I can
So
imagine
that
that
was it.
that really enforced that negative core belief that I'm not smart,
Mm-hmm.
that you felt stupid. And yeah, I'm so excited to get to the next question when we talk about coping skills, but there's still more that I want to dive
It's
in
all
here.
good. Let's do it.
Yeah, so you get to that point that you feel like into the next story where your wife had an affair on you and where you felt like I'm crappy, I'm a failure, I'm a therapist, I'm the last person this should be happening to. I help other people not do this, so why me? And but you have this inner belief that I didn't choose this. I don't think personally that that is the most normal response to when affairs happen. I feel like a lot of people that I'm personally aware of that have been either, or the one betrayed, their typical thought is, well, I deserved this, right? My lack of my the friend, the lack of pursuit, whatever it was, caused them to go and have an affair. Um,
Mhm.
did you ever have those thoughts as well, or was it really just, I know this wasn't my choice. I know I didn't choose this.
No, I absolutely had those.
Hmm.
And they came quickly, and they were definitely, maybe I would say, reactionary
Okay.
to the things, in
Hmm.
part because at the beginning of this process, my wife did blame me a lot. Well, if
Hmm.
you had done this or didn't do that, then I wouldn't have had to go find it somewhere else, essentially.
Right.
Right.
Hmm.
And so I had a lot of that self deprecation. And once I could slow down a little bit,
Hmm.
that's when I could breathe and say, like, had I done those things, she still could have been unhappy because she's broken too.
Right.
And she
She's a,
still most likely would have found something else to
yeah, she's a
blame me
human.
for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she's human just like us. Oh man. Okay, cool. So dude, yeah, those were some very hard pivotal moments in your life. I mean, a coma and affair,
Yeah.
that's not super common that both of those happen in someone's life, but I know that people are going to be able to empathize with you because of their own stuff. So thank you for sharing those really vulnerable stories, man. That's awesome
Yeah.
that you were willing to come on and share those things.
Yeah.
So my next question for you, and it's going to be multifaceted, right? We're going to work through this a lot.
Okay.
Coping skills.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about both of these situations, both the coma and the affair, and I want to know from you and we'll just go one at a time with the part where you felt stupid because you were young. At
Hmm.
what point did you have that pivotal moment where you said, you know what, I'm not stupid, or like, I'm done feeling stupid? And when was
Hmm.
that? What did that look like? And then what did you start to do to retrain your brain to start having the belief that I'm smart?
Um, I don't think that that changed until probably 10 years ago.
10 years ago, how old were you when you were
And so that would have been 30ish.
30ish? Okay.
And I think the thing that changed that is, as I got into my career as a therapist, like,
Hmm.
that I was working with started getting better. And I know that a lot of that is on them.
Mm-hmm.
I personally believe a lot of that, of course, is on God.
100%.
And they were not getting worse by coming to see me. Right. So they couldn't have been
Yeah.
that bad. And so then all of a sudden, as people started getting better, and I started kind of sending them on their way, if you will, into life,
Hmm.
and them coming back as well and reporting, like, hey, I want to let you know that, like, my wife and I are doing really well, or like, I haven't had this problem that, we worked through in a long time.
Hmm.
Or when I do have something like depression or anxiety come up, which I think is pretty normal,
Hmm.
I was able to handle it. I was able to work through it, and it didn't take me and drag me down like it used to.
That's awesome.
And so then all of a sudden, the thoughts were like, you know, this transition from I'm stupid and not good
Hmm.
to, like, maybe I'm not great or even good at it or whatever, but it started to move towards, well, maybe I'm not that bad.
Hmm.
And that progressed more and more as people that I was helping got better and better for me to believe something,
Yeah.
to
So,
believe something different.
if I'm hearing you right, serving other people and sharing with them tools and skills helped you feel better about yourself. So much so that it changed a negative core belief.
Yeah.
Okay. And
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 I think I could have taken a lot more intentionality about that now.
yeah,
Had I known some of this, like, that was kind of a happy accident that I
right.
started to, like, work into this self mastery, if you will, of being a therapist.
Hmm.
That, had I known this kind of idea, I could have tried to implement it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if all I did was shut down, nobody even around me could know that I was having a hard time.
Right. Right. That's awesome, man. Good on you. And that's cool that you can look back and see and realize that that happy accident was something that actually like really positively changed your life for the better. Was there
Mhm.
ever any like mantras or anything that you did on a daily basis to help reinforce that core belief that I am smart and I have value? Or was it really just that
Honestly,
the
nope.
constant? That's okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to be.
And the reason why I think that this is actually, I'm glad that you brought this up, and why I think that it's so important is because when you have that core belief, I have yet for myself or for pretty much anyone that I've worked with
Hmm.
say that core belief is I am stupid.
Hmm.
I haven't actually found anyone that can just say I am smart or whatever the mantra might be
Hmm.
and really believe it, because your mind already has so much evidence to the contrary.
Hmm.
And so, what I actually started to do was to take a future tense to something. And so, instead of saying I am smart, it would be it is like me to be smart,
Okay.
right? Because I knew in that moment that I wasn't, but I also knew that it was possible.
Okay. And as a therapist, what in that change from, because I do that a lot too, where I'll sit there and I'll look at myself and I'll be like, I love myself. I love you. 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 And I'll look at my eyes in the
BS.
mirror. Right. Right. And I have that thought. It's like, I parts of me do love myself because I've been doing recovery work for years. And at the same time, I still don't like how big my stomach is. Right. I still don't
Right.
like that, like this little part of my beard hair starts to grow out to the side. Like there are these things that I don't like and or I don't love about myself. And
Mhm.
so like what about speaking in future tense like, hey, I'm capable of loving myself.
Mhm.
What about that shifts in the brain that allows someone to actually start working on loving themselves?
I think it's hope.
Okay.
So, um, hope is something that I think is crucial. There was a study that was done on rats about hope, and they found
Yes.
that,
Is this
like
the rats in the
essentially,
water?
yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it takes a rat, say, 15 minutes to drown,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of do this funny thing where they lift up their paws apparently,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally give up, and they just stop swimming and they sink. And
Mm-hmm.
so what the researchers did was they took the rats, and as soon as they got underneath the water, they
Mm-hmm.
would reach in and grab them and save them and dry them off and put them away. And then when they would take them again and put them back into the water,
Mm-hmm.
they would go for some crazy amount of time, like
It's like
60 hours
yeah,
or
that's what I was gonna
something
say.
like that,
60 hours is what I heard too.
some ridiculous amount of time, which is huge. That's like 240 times 15 minutes,
Right.
right? And the only thing that they can think of is that the rats found hope in that this mythical hand is going to come down and save them
Mm-hmm.
from death.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, as human beings, we are so resourceful and resilient,
Mm-hmm.
especially if there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
If I tell someone that they're going to suffer for the next, 18 months, it's like, okay, I made it through today. I only have this many more days to go.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that, and then everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we get into some really hard thing that we're trying to do and overcome, whether it's, say, a pornography addiction or an affair or just, say, general depression or anxiety, and we
Mm-hmm.
can't see that light at the end of the tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden that hope goes away. And then it's like that part inside of us is only paying attention to these two options.
The
The
15 minutes of treading water, essentially.
Yeah, the I'm going to give up now,
Mm-hmm.
or like I'm going to feel and hurt and be miserable.
Yeah.
And so when we're in that moment, that's, that suicide or the easy way out seems nice,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
right?
so question for you, and I think this is going to be a nugget of information for those. So for those who are listening, pay really close attention to what McCall's about to say because I know it's going to be gold. So McCall, for those sitting in their houses right now, in their rooms, driving in their cars, that they're alone, they're in a dark place, they're in the 14th of the 15th minute, and they need hope before they throw their hands in the air and drown. What is something that someone can do in this moment? Right now, as they're listening to it, that's going to give them hope to keep going.
I think that you're not alone. Like when people come into my office and I see them hurting and I see them suffering,
Hmm.
like it feels as though they believe that they are the only ones that have ever hurt or suffered with this thing.
Hmm.
And little do they know, the very next person that's going to sit on that couch might not be experiencing the exact same thing,
Hmm.
but they're certainly feeling, say, the same despair or the same hopelessness.
Right.
And, I know you have, and I have as well. I have felt that despair and I felt that hopelessness.
Oh, completely.
And I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is to not try to go through stuff alone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So for those listening right now, if you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling like you are in a moment of despair and you want to die, if you feel like there's no other option, just know that there's at least two other guys that you're listening to right now that have felt exactly what you're going through. And we want you to call someone right now. Call someone and just tell them, hey, I am feeling despair. And I bet any dollar they'll say, hey, me too. Or, hey, I have too. Let's talk about it. Right. And hopefully if you call someone and they say something along the lines of, suck it up. Don't be their friend. call someone who
They
will
might not be the best support for you.
might not be the best support in that moment, but yeah, I love that, McCall. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. I want to move on and dive a little bit more into your affair. So,
Yeah.
same question kind of as we had with the coma. At what point in that process of desperation and hopelessness and all of those things did you finally put your foot down and say, I'm done? I'm ready to change. And what skills did you practice to make that change?
I don't think that there was a moment.
Okay.
I think that there was thousands and thousands of moments.
What did those moments
So
look like? Yeah.
something would come up, some memory, some thought, some, to use the quintessential word, trigger would happen, and it would cause my mind to go to some really, really dark places.
Right.
And I had to choose every single time to go to a different spot.
In these dark places, were they places of suicide, places of,
Um,
and there's no, yeah,
yeah, sometimes it was suicide, but more often than not, it was like, say, picturing like my wife and this guy
yeah.
or something along those lines. Because my mind, it was looking so hard as I
Hmm.
was trying to figure out what was going on between us for evidence that something was wrong.
Hmm.
And my wife had denied anything for a good solid 8 months.
Hmm.
And then after that, it was another year and 4 months before she kind of took responsibility for anything.
Hmm.
And so anything that she would do, she could be on her phone and I could see it. And I could see that, say, she's texting her mom. But then my mind would be like, well, that's just because I'm right here in the room.
Right.
She really wants to text this other guy. Or she's even texting her mom about how to watch, say, our kids so that she can go off with this other guy.
Right.
Right. So my mind would just make up stuff. that
Right.
wasn't true, because it needed something to grab onto to try to manage and understand and process the hurt and the pain that I was going through.
Right.
And if I can blame that on someone else,
It's easier.
that's what's easier, right?
Right.
Because our mind's trying to do the easy thing. And so I had to choose over and over and over again, and be like, okay, like, I don't know that this is true.
Hmm.
And
And
if it is, I'll deal
yeah.
with that. But right now it's not. So I need to kind of re-ground myself and come
Yeah.
back to center.
And how long into this process post affair did you start recognizing that's what you were doing? You were going to the easy choice. And how soon in the process, or how long into the process before you started saying that mantra? That's not true right now because this is what the truth is. Right.
It was pretty early
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a fairly logical person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I shut down all my emotions for a long time, so all I could lean on was logic, right?
Thanks, Mom.
So it was fairly early that I started doing it. It's
Hmm.
just, I think because I wasn't allowing myself to feel as much either, I
Hmm.
was getting stuck. And so
Mm.
I needed it. How do I say this? It was taking years,
Right.
4 or 5 years, for it to like really kind of sink in a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think the pivotal point of that is not actually the time, but actually allowing myself to start feeling again, and that it was okay that it hurt. Because at
Yeah.
some point I was I was still trying at the beginning of the affair process to not feel or to shut it down.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years into it
Hmm.
that I started to feel in and started to look in and feel all the things and have that self compassion that, like, it should hurt. And so it's okay that it does.
Yeah. That self-compassion practice. I know Tyler talked about that in our last episode. So
Yeah.
that's awesome that you use it as well. What what was it like first allowing yourself to feel everything? Because I can imagine there's going to be at least one guy out there in the world, probably many, that have experienced something similar to you, and or even women for that matter, who have had an affair on them as well, and they're sitting here feeling, I don't want to feel these things because it's just going to hurt so much. Like, yeah, what does it look like to feel? What is it? Yeah, what were those first few moments like?
Um, that's a really good question.
Hmm.
I think that I'm actually still working with that,
Okay, yeah,
because I
that's
think
okay.
my default is not to feel.
Hmm.
Um, I think that one thing that's coming up quite often is that I need to step into the emotion and be willing to face it. I need to be curious with it.
Hmm.
I didn't listen to a lot of music because of emotions that it would bring up.
Hmm.
And so I've started trying to listen to music more
Hmm.
to help invoke some of that emotion.
An emotional
Like,
response.
for example, one of the times that after I knew that my wife was cheating on me, but she still hadn't admitted it,
Hmm.
it was actually after a couples therapy session, she chose to go to a concert with him. But she said it was just with friends. And on the way to therapy, she had said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go. I don't really want to." I said,
Hmm.
"Great." Because I knew that it wasn't with just a friend.
Right.
Right. And so then after the therapy session, she said, "I think I'm still going to go." And because I wanted her to choose me instead of saying, "Hey, I know what you're doing," I said, "Okay." And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's what I did. And so she didn't know this at the time, but because we were on the same uh, phone plan, that Find My Friends or whatever was
Hmm.
just active already. And
Mm.
so I knew where the concert was. because she had told me, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't really hide that. I knew who she was going to see. And so I could have looked it up to know that she was
Mm-hmm.
lying. And I watched her, and she didn't go there. She went to some apartment, right, for hours before the concert.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew what was happening
Mm-hmm.
at this apartment, right? And it destroyed me.
And that was after the affair came out or before?
No, that was before. She
Gotcha.
didn't she was still lying about what was going on.
Gotcha.
And it was really like some of the most challenging moments in my life because I wanted so badly to allow her to be honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't take that opportunity.
Right. So, man, I can imagine that was so hard and that destroyed you when that happened. And I know you had mentioned that now with these coping skills that you've been using, music has been helping you learn how to tap into feeling.
Yeah. And so I guess just being willing to sit there and feel. So the reason why I was mentioning this thing about the her going to this concert is listening to this band, the Chainsmokers, the
Hmm.
concert that she was at was so hard. And now choosing to listen to them, knowing that it's going to bring up some hurt and pain,
Hmm.
but then actually allowing myself to feel it
Hmm.
instead of run from it or shut it down or
Hmm.
stuff it down.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you listen to the Chainsmokers and it releases all of this emotion and you're feeling it, what are some of the healthy skills or tools that you use to help you release that emotion instead of shoving it down?
I think the biggest one is going to be the self compassion.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay that it hurts
Hmm.
and that I struggle with it and suffer a little bit
Hmm.
because it's not the end of the world. And the other one is kind of going to come from the book is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Hmm.
And it's a fantastic book, but it's kind of this same idea that in order to really live life, you have to live right now.
Right.
And so, whatever I'm feeling right now, either positive or negative, is what's okay to feel.
Right.
And so, it can be a negative thing that we then allow to flow through us,
Hmm.
or it could also be, say, you're having a great time with your family or your friends,
Hmm.
not necessarily trying to hang on to that either
Right.
and keep it around, but just allow whatever comes to just come
Come and go as it needs to.
and go as it needs to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I know like the self-talk that I personally have is when hard trials are going through like debt, for example. I'll sit there and I'll throw my head back and I'll just be like, this is never gonna end. Like, right. And I hold on to it that way. And when something is really good and I'm having like a good experience, I'm like, oh, this is not gonna last. So
Mhm.
it's like I'm setting myself up for failure. So that's really smart to just realize that emotion is energy in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a wave, comes and goes. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, McCall, thank you for sharing all of not only all of your beautiful and vulnerable story, but some of the just the really simple and amazing coping techniques that are so effective. So
Mhm.
now, and I know you mentioned you're still working through stuff, and that is, in my opinion, the human trial. That is the human, that's life, right? It happens. You grow, you learn stuff, you go through stuff, you die. And broken down very simply. But as it up to this point, I want to know about your appreciation for your journey so far. So up to this point, looking back
Mhm.
with 2020 hindsight, what are the things about what you've gone through that you appreciate, that you can look at yourself now and saying, you know what? Yeah, that really sucked in the moment. And I know I am this much better because of it. What are some of those things?
Mhm. Um, I remember watching movies before, particularly The Affair,
Mm-hmm.
and being like, how cool would it be to be able to have the strength and fortitude that some of these guys would have?
Yeah.
I know last podcast you had mentioned, I think it was Gladiator. I think
Yeah.
actually Braveheart came up in that one too,
Uh-huh. Yeah, I did.
where it's like these men never quit. And I'd get all this energy to, like, say, exercise, and that would last like 4 minutes
Mm-hmm.
when I'm watching this movie. But it'd also be self deprecating, right? Because
Right.
here's, William Wallace, like, causing a civil war because his wife was raped and murdered,
Mm-hmm.
and because he didn't want to share her. And so what does he do? He goes out and starts a civil war and
Right.
gets Scotland their freedom, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think inside of us, we all, especially as men, we all have this desire to want to be, to want to accomplish, to want to, like, thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't give ourselves credit for the ways that we can and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt so weak before. And of course, there's times where I feel weak now, but overall, like, this strength that um, I would argue that I have now is,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't actually give up if I could go back in time and have the affair not happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would choose that
Okay.
because I wouldn't have grown how I have now.
That's awesome.
I wouldn't have figured out what my values are. I wouldn't have figured out what that actually means to live my values, that might actually mean upsetting someone,
Mm-hmm.
because of whatever is important to me,
Mm-hmm.
particularly my wife. I was definitely like a yes, ma'am kind of husband. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do. That's what we're doing.
Right.
No matter what, I will. And the intention there is great. The intention there is, I love you. I want you to be happy. But it was at the expense of my soul, if you will.
Yeah.
And so
It
that
was
resentment would build up.
it was the nice guy.
And
Yeah.
yep, total nice guy syndrome. And so being able to look back at that, the ways that I've grown, I wouldn't actually trade it in.
That's
And it
awesome.
sounds kind of crazy
It
when
does.
you really think about it, right?
It does.
But I might also just be crazy, so that's fine too.
And I think there's something so powerful about looking at what you've gone through and saying, you know what? I'm better because of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I lost a sister to suicide for those who don't know. And there is part of me that just says, like, oh man, I wish she never would have died. I wish she never
Yeah.
had to go through suicide and the mental health and all of those things. And she was 16, and I wish I never had to experience what it was like to get that phone call from my dad. I was it's those one of those moments that you never forget, right? I was sitting at Wendy's in Stuttgart, Arkansas, and I had just gotten paid. I bought a McDouble, or not McDouble, Wendy's Baconator. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember sitting there and looking at it, and it looked just like it did in the commercial. Oh, dude, I was so pumped to eat this. And then I get the call and I didn't eat the burger because I was so emotionally
You
distraught.
were
And
destroyed.
yeah, absolutely. And we went through this whole process of things. And you know what? I honestly can look at it all now, as hard as it was, and I can appreciate it because, like you said, it made me stronger. Right? It
Mm-hmm.
made me wiser. It created a lot of humility in me, right? Nothing's permanent. We're
Mm-hmm.
not invincible. It helped me look at my value systems just like you. So I think there's a lot of power in being able to look at a situation either during the situation or after and say, you know what, this is making me better, or this made me better, though it
Yeah.
was hard, right? I think that's God's journey for all of us. Thank you so much for all of the advice that you've brought and the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us today. It has really, truly been life changing for not only me, but for everyone listening to this podcast. So, second to last question for you. For those people just getting into the world of mental health, what advice do you have for those people?
I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier,
Mhm.
but honestly, I would say don't do it alone.
Okay.
Don't
Yeah.
do it alone. It's so, even if it's not like, say, professional help, being able to have just someone that might be able to understand a little bit about what you're going through, what's happening, not necessarily give any advice or what you should do about it,
Mhm.
but just that understanding.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think addiction and mental health, it almost convinces you, and I know it's done for me personally and a lot of people we know, that you do feel alone. You do feel like you're the
Mhm.
only one dealing with this issue. So I love that. What do you think are one or two actionable steps that someone can take to help them find someone that they can rely on, someone that they can use
Mhm.
as their support system as they're starting their journey?
That's actually kind of the hard slash scary part about it is that you have to take that risk. If it's with friends, take that risk of, hey, this is what I'm going through. I'm looking at pornography, or I'm cheating on my spouse, or whatever it is,
Hmm.
because they might say, I can't be friends with you anymore.
Right.
That's part of the risk that we take. And I would actually argue that if I really needed someone and I went to them and I said, hey, I say I'm looking at pornography,
Hmm.
I'd act, and they said I can't be your friend anymore. At the end of the day,
It's a good thing.
that's fantastic.
Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
cool. I don't need to waste my time with you anymore because I know you can't actually be there for me.
Exactly. And it's probably because they're feeling shame because they're
Mhm.
doing the same stuff.
They're probably doing the same stuff,
They're
right?
probably doing the same exact stuff. As sad as
um,
that is, but it's yeah.
yeah, but then that is also where, if either funds allow or the insurance or whatever, getting some help in terms of some sort of professional is nice, because
Mhm.
you're paying them to be there and to understand at first, and then help you through it.
Exactly. And one thing too to consider, there are a lot of religious congregations or organizations that actually have funds to help with this kind of
Hmm.
stuff. So like I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I know like personally, if you go to your bishop or stake president and talk to them, they have a fund set aside to pay for these kind of things to help you out if you can't. Because and they have
Hmm.
programs to help within the church too, just kind of depending on your needs.
Yeah, and I know, having lived in California for a handful of years, a lot of non-denominational, like Christian churches, they have like a pastor on staff that is kind of for this, that's trained a little bit more in therapy than just being an ecclesiastical leader.
Mhm.
And so a lot of them will have someone on staff that might be able to help out
Love it.
too.
Absolutely love it. All right, last question for you, McCall. How can people get in contact with you? If people want to talk to you more, if they want to share their appreciation for your vulnerability, he is a licensed therapist. So if you're messed up and you want some of his help, how can people contact you?
Yeah. The easiest way to contact me directly
Mhm.
is either call or text me. My
Okay.
phone number is 951
Okay.
291 8678. And people are also more than welcome, because I do work with Tyler too at Love Strong.
Okay.
They're more than welcome to contact me there as well. So they could go to lovestrong.com, I believe it is, and then
Mhm.
you can set up a consultation call with me, or of course with Tyler too.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And I'll make sure all that stuff
So
is in the details, the description of the podcast. McCall, thank you so
yeah.
much, everyone. For those who listened and have gotten to the end here, still be thinking of someone you might know who could use this information, and please share it with them. This is so powerful. This talk was so powerful today. McCall shared such valuable information and some amazing skills that you can use to work through some really hard situations in your life. And all credit to McCall because he's made it through these hard situations as well. So McCall, one more time, just a big thank you for coming on today, bro. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it too. It was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it was
I'm
good,
excited.
man. It was a really good conversation. And for those who want to come on the podcast, just so you know, no name is too big, no story is too small. If you've got a story, I want to share them all. So please make sure to contact me. You can get a hold of me at chase@thewellnesscenter.life. If you want to know more about what I do personally to help with my mental health, go to thewellnesscenter.life, where we focus on full body red light therapy, where every cell is rejuvenated one session at a time. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Peace out.